Hey, everybody, welcome to the Grow Rogue podcast. Today, I'm joined by One Yu. One is a designer. He focuses on user experience and the cutting edge of the way we use all of this new technology. One is a first-generation immigrant and a first-generation entrepreneur. His story is super interesting. I know that you're going to get something from this, so make sure to watch all the way through and make sure to share this with a friend. All right, let's get started. Audience and our viewers would love to hear kind of how you came to be in the position that you are.
Yeah, so I'm Juan. I run my own product design studio called WJY Studios here in Atlanta. I've been doing design now for over 20 years. So I like to joke that I'm one of the OGs. I teach part-time as a professor of interactive design at GSU. And I think I've been designing longer than most of my students have been alive at this point. So I fortunately looked into web design sort of as my entree into design. I was studying engineering, and it just happened to be that U of I, where I was going to school, was the birthplace of the modern browser. And for anyone who's old enough to remember this time, the early days of the internet, you would browse on a console. So you would use like a terminal. There was nothing like really graphical. So having a browser was one of like the first innovations that made the web much more accessible and popular. And when I experienced the web through that, I was like blown away. And one of the first things I wanted to do was design my own homepage. And when I did that, I slowly found myself getting increasingly addicted. I was like, okay, I want to do these cool things that I'm seeing online, looking at the HTML source, reverse engineering it, and we're like, okay, I'm going to add this to my page, I'm going to add that, add animations, and slowly but surely I found myself spending more time doing that than actual my classwork. And it wasn't until I graduated that I did design professionally. But I am a first generation immigrant. So I came to the US at the age of 4 with my parents from Korea. And entrepreneurialism has always been part of, I think, my family spirit, the American dream. And they my father worked with his uncles, with his brothers, who are my uncles, in dry cleaning. And then my dad eventually opened up his own dry cleaners. And so this idea of being your own boss has been sort of like part of my DNA from growing up. And I think I joke with people about this now, but I don't think I'm a very good employee. I'm a little too strong-willed. I've got a lot of opinions on how things should be done. And being able to have that autonomy and agency of running your own business, figuring out ideas, being willing to take bets and take risks, especially if you believe in them. I think when you are able to put money behind your ideas and say, actually, I'm willing to invest in this and see if it works, and then you reap the rewards, right? And so it's very high risk, high reward. In a job, you're really not incentivized to be entrepreneurial. Even in organizations where I've been as part of like an incubator team or some sort of R&D and innovation team, they aren't inherently incentivized to be really risk-taking, because most of those companies, particularly the Fortune 100 and Fortune 1000 companies, they've got a product market fit. They already have something that works. So they're really not willing to rock the boat, particularly when it might cannibalize their primary business line, right? So it's one of those things where if I'm really passionate about an idea, I love the fact that I can sort of pursue it through my own company versus having to wait for somebody to give approvals or to greenlight it. And so, that's how I found myself running my own studios. That after spending time working in a variety of different companies in different capacities, I just found myself going back to, you know what, I need to do it for myself versus do it for someone else.
I love that story, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I'll be honest, like I am an absolute sucker for like the immigrant to American dream story. Like I think it is the story of our nation, right? I think
Mm,
from almost from its founding or for pre founding till today, people are still coming here because it is the best place in the
yes.
world to create the life that you really want on your own terms. And I think it not only attracts those with entrepreneurial visions, it is the perfect breeding ground for that, right? Because it's like if you came here and that was kind of a part of your upbringing, then it makes perfect sense that here you are as an adult. And I've said this about myself before, not that I'm an immigrant, but I've said this about myself that like I would be a terrible employee. I'm
Yeah.
just, I think you and I are just wired that way, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you can't, and you probably had this same feeling, right? I've been a part of other organizations, even just working as, them as a client where I'm like, man, this is a really great culture and this is a really awesome, team to kind of be at least in the room with. But it's like, when it's not yours, there's just
Mm,
like this itch, I think, that you're either born with that or you're not. Maybe it's developed, I don't know, but it's like you can't help but try to like break out of that box. And
yes.
so it sounds like, you kind of experienced that and that's what has kind of put you in this position. And you not so to kind of transition back to your business and the industry that you're in, you not only had that entrepreneurial itch and that desire to get into something that was your own, you got onto something that really hadn't been done before. I was talking to a group of high schoolers not long ago, and what's the question that people always ask young people? Like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I think
Mm.
it's a terrible question because most likely the thing that they will do when they grow up doesn't exist yet, right? And in
Oh,
our generation, I think was among the first to experience that. So, given that you were kind of into something that didn't exist before and it is constantly breaking new ground, what does the world look like? What's the typical day to day look like for you when you are, when you're working, when you're kind of, just kind of
mm.
chipping away at that next piece, right? Are you thinking about where's the industry going, right? What are people's tastes changing? I'd love to know kind of your creative process.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think uh, it breaks down into a couple of areas, right? So one is staying on top of design trends, visual styles, and those things are, I think, pretty easy to stay abreast of, whether it's just by going through online design award sites or blogs, Medium, all of those things. It's pretty easy to get a sort of a pulse on where the visual aesthetic is for any given year, and it does shift. I almost feel like now that we live in this hyper connected age where everything is online, design trends sort of evolve much more quickly than they did in the past. I feel like back in the aughts, like in the 2000s, if you had something that was trending, it would take maybe a few years for that trend to kind of evolve or change. Nowadays, it seems that in the era of Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, like these design trends get disseminated so quickly now and copycatted that trends come and go really at hyper speed. Like you'll see
Mhm.
people mimic or copy a style and then it becomes oversaturated and then eventually people move away from that style. And
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
turnover now I feel like is incredibly quick, much more so than there it's ever been in the past. In terms of technology, I think that's an interesting area. I'm always looking. I It's an occupational hazard, but I'm always finding myself downloading apps, looking at Product Hunt, looking at websites in terms of what new startups are coming on the scene. And part of that is because I do work so closely with tech startups in particular, and
Mhm.
so knowing where the trends are is obviously super important in terms of being able to service them. Right now, as everybody knows, AI has just exploded over the last couple of years. And so every client of mine right now wants some sort of AI integration into their product. And so understanding that technology, understanding how that works, what are the kind of patterns, what are the interaction designs that are out there that is sort of the evolving motif like those are things that are really important. Obviously, I acclimate myself and teach myself that through using those products, through early adoption, reading articles and looking at what my peers are doing, and then using that to inform the work that I do for my clients.
I really appreciate that answer, right? Because I mean, again, we're like stacking the challenges, right? Because,
Mm.
you're in an industry that where kind of by nature, everything is like you're forced to find the cutting edge. And then kind of within that, you're dealing in tech startups where a lot of times their model, right? And their market is yet undefined in a lot of ways. So you're having to kind of look into the future on behalf of your clients, and then also from your own practice, right? Your own skill set, kind of look into the future and figure out how to apply that. So, geez, good luck. So,
Well, I think that's part of the appeal, right? Like it's never
yeah,
boring. It's
that's
always
right.
new challenges. It's very rarely going to be the same. I have one client that has a direct to consumer personal relationship advice app, and then another one is a fintech product. Those are very different products, and so I think part of the appeal for me is learning a new market, learning a new domain, solving new challenges that I haven't necessarily seen before, but obviously leveraging a lot of the industry experience that I've gotten to help kind of have a better process for tackling new challenges and being able to take them on. But I think that's what makes this industry so exciting as well, is that
Hmm.
you can't just rest on your laurels. You're always having to up level your skills and learn something new. I think having an innate curiosity is vital to success. Like you can't just be like, I'm done. I know everything there is to know, right?
Yeah.
Like you can just kind of like check out at that point. No, you genuinely have to keep teaching yourself new things, learning, trying new things, keeping an open mind in terms of where the future is heading. Because I think one of the one of the trends, if we kind of like look back in terms of the evolution of just the web, right? Like everything was on desktop, and then as the iPhone came out, it became mobile, and then it became like mobile apps, and then
Hmm.
doing things, through native mobile. And now we're in this era of AI where now it's much more conversational, right? So it's a lot
Yes.
of those
Yeah.
UI patterns where it's like tap and click, or it became like tap, click, and gestures. And now it's like, no, you can just, it's multimodal interactions with AI. It's like you can just ask AI to do something for you, and then it's going to be a combination of you talk to it, it shows you something, you interact with the thing it shows you, right? So all of these patterns continue to evolve, and Mark Zuckerberg recently shared his work with AR glasses, right?
Yeah. I saw that.
Orion. And
Yeah.
so now that's another layer. It's like another layer of interactivity that if it does become kind of like the future as he foresees it, then it presents even new challenges there.
So I think you're uncovering, I think, for our audience, and I want to talk about this, right? Is this idea that you cannot just reach a point. You're not going to reach a point where you're like, well, I'm good enough, right? Like I'm as good as I need to be at this, right? Because it's constantly changing. I had this conversation with my 6-year-old the other day. I was like, buddy, because he loves baseball, right? He's
Yeah.
pretty good for a 6-year-old. And I was like, buddy, we got to get out there in the yard. We got to start practicing. I know it's off season, but you got to keep practicing. And he says, Dad, I don't need to practice. I'm already good. And I was like, dude, that's not how it works, man. Like you are one, there's that rule. If you're not getting, you're either getting better or you're getting worse, right? There's no staying the
Mm,
same. But also, the competition is always getting better, right?
yeah.
In his case, people are growing, people are getting bigger, right? So you got to keep developing. And in our world, there's no, especially, digital marketing is kind of, it's similar to what you're dealing with, in that if we're not constantly aware and adjusting to the marketplace, well, then we're 2-3 years behind. If you're 2 or 3 years behind in especially as fast as things are moving today, you might as well be a dinosaur, right? You're almost
Yeah.
completely, you're a VCR, right? Like you're not relevant anymore at all. So that's
Yeah,
such a great
there's
lesson.
probably kids who don't even know what a VCR is at this point. VCR, I know what a DVD is. What's a
Yeah, if you're a
VCR?
Gen Zer and you're watching this, a VCR was this thing that we used to have to put this cassette tape in. Man, we don't have time to do all this.
Right.
Go Google what those things are. But yeah, I mean, you can become irrelevant really quickly. I
Yeah,
kind of
I mean,
actually,
like, yeah, just to kind of like
yeah,
build on that. If I just think about like how quickly marketing has changed, I
right,
remember because I've done work within advertising as well, and I remember when influencers were first becoming a thing, right?
right,
And even before then, I remember. So I was doing work at Discovery Communications, which is now Warner Discovery,
yep, yep,
but they were the parent company of Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, TLC, all of those channels, and I remember they were getting really big, particularly because of reality TV, right? All of their programming was reality TV, essentially, whether it was Naked and Afraid.
yeah,
So it's all reality TV, right? and um, and then it quickly became YouTubers. There's kids
yes,
talking about like their favorite celebrity is a YouTuber, and when I first heard that, I was like, whoa, that there's a seismic shift coming. And then in advertising, we started to explore these brand deals with influencers to be the face. I remember one client that we had at an agency where what's his name, Logan Paul was one of the first influencers they used for like a Bic razor or something, and it was really like a watershed moment. It was like the beginnings of it, right? And now almost every social media post is done with some sort of influencer marketing. It's
hmm
never just
hmm
posting directly to Instagram. Now it's like you need to sponsor some sort of influencer that has access to the market, and you need to do influencer marketing as part of your strategy.
right.
It's crazy. Now we've got TikTok. Before it was, posts, and now it's like videos, short form videos, right? It's continuing to evolve.
Yeah, it changes so fast, and yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, what I'm super curious to see what I mean. You sit back and you think like, well, what is this going to look like in 2, 3, 5 years?
Mm,
And it's moving at a rate where the right thing to do, I think, is just to kind of just what is the phrase? Keep your ear to the ground, right? Because there's no way
mm.
to predict this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very hard.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe if we talk to like the 12-year-olds, that's where the future will
exactly.
be.
Yeah, let's do some market research from my kids' friends. Um, Well, so I actually want to flip that a little bit. So on the kind of the other side of the coin there, we feel this way about marketing is that as these trends come and go, right? There are a few what I would consider to be principles. I would differentiate between trends and principles, right? So certain
Mm,
principles that are timeless, right? And what we talk about a lot is like, trust in a brand, right? And content that genuinely adds value, right? Like those things are kind of like as old as time, right? And I
right.
believe those will continue. What are some of those principles in your line of work do you see? And you're like, hey, no matter what changes with the technology or with the trends, these are principles that we apply to almost everything that we do.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when we talk about user experience in particular, there are some very well established usability principles. One example is Jacob Nielsen, who's one of the sort of early forefathers of UX in the web. He had crafted these 10 usability heuristics. And so those are like system status, giving the user some sort of feedback, being able to give error prevention, so preventing an error from happening. There's a lot of these kind of like underlying things that we strive for. So I would kind of like break it up into a few different levels from a product standpoint, right? It needs to have product market fit, which means it's that intersection of desirability, usability, and then feasibility, right? In terms of, is it a viable business? Is it technically feasible to build? And then in terms of the design, in terms of making that product usable, is it learnable? Is it memorable? Is it discoverable? Is it engaging, right? Like there's a lot of different metrics and ways in which we can measure and evaluate how successful we are with our designs. I think thankfully in our field, a lot of the digital experience side of things have kind of matured to a point where we do have a lot more tools in
Yeah.
terms of being able to guide our designs from that principled standpoint, regardless of whatever the modality is in terms of the interaction pattern. Because at the end of the day, you still need to make sure that the user understands it, can learn
Hmm.
it, can use it, will remember how to use it the next time, or if they need a reminder that you have these ways to inform the user, or when it comes to navigation, that there's labeling that are intuitive or wayfinding to let a user know how to get to where they want. So there's a lot of, I think, tried and true patterns that we've developed. I think some of those will need kind of a new analog in these new
Mm.
patterns, right? So I think particularly when it comes to conversational UI, there that opens up a sort of a wide aperture in terms of possibilities because the way a person might talk to an AI agent will be very different. It's not going to be like very well like narrowly defined where for instance in a kind of a click and point website or UI interface you would see a button, you click said button and then you go through a series of steps, right? Whereas here I think in the future it'll be kind of a user just says something, right? It might be like noun, adjective, thing, and it could be a lot of permutations of that, and all of those things need to lead to the same outcome. So those flows will inherently look different. I think we're probably going to see a lot more flow diagrams in terms of how we model UX, right? Because like currently, what we do is a lot of two-dimensional screens that we show sort of like a storyboard sequentially showing
Hmm.
like how it's supposed to work. But now it's not really about a UI where user clicks this, then it takes them here, and then they do this, and then it takes them to this next screen. Now it's like if the user says this, this is what the AI might say, and then this
Might
is like the
say.
follow-ups that
Hmm.
the user will then could potentially choose to say in response. And so like that tree, that dialogue tree that emerges will look very different and probably might be the new way that we'll have to start to model and scaffold these experiences moving forward. But it's a very different animal. I don't think the way that my field has been designing will look the same. Like those things will probably not be the same tools we use moving forward.
That's super interesting. And by the way, I'm going to put a bunch of definitions on the screen when
Okay.
one talks about apertures and heuristics and these things. So I appreciate that. Um, no, I think you're right. I think the AI stuff specifically is it's going to, it's like we were talking about before. It's going to change things in a way that we're not yet prepared. We can't really predict for what to do. So kind of staying being aware and being ready to adapt and to shift as necessary for those things. Because yeah, the spider web of it's not a decision tree anymore. Like it's a decision spider web, right? You know, because like it
Yeah.
can go in a lot of different directions, and then it can fork and it can go back on itself. And there's millions of possible responses, right? That an AI
Absolutely.
could give, and so kind of building around that unpredictability in a way that I think you have to almost, I'm going to steal another term right from a book. This twice in this one, but like you almost have to create the design version of like anti-fragility, where it's like the
Mm.
more complex and chaotic something is, the more valuable and useful it becomes. But that's I'm just really kind of thinking out loud at this point because it's there's so many possibilities there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely.
so I think this is I want to transition a little bit, you know, kind of back to you as an entrepreneur. You've got this, we'll call it like a vertical skill set, right? And we talk a
Mm.
lot about being like a T-shaped or an M-shaped professional, right? Like you have a vertical skill set, and then you have like a lot of things that you do from a, horizontally across the business. And some people have that kind of M shape, right? Where they've got a few different skill sets. Well, one of them that we have to have as entrepreneurs is you've got to have the ability to market and sell yourself first, right? Your business. So what are you doing for the firm, from a marketing and sales standpoint? What's working really well for you guys?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think as with any business, the the funnel that is always the most successful, right, in term conversion is always referrals, word of mouth,
Yeah.
affiliate networks, partnerships with either accretive agencies or firms that are in the same industry but provides a different service that is complementary to your own. To give an example, working with like a engineering or development firm who doesn't do design, right? And
Right.
they can refer you business or you can refer them business. And being part of that partnership makes it very easy to get new leads through the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the most successful. I find that, frankly, the other channels that I've worked or experimented with have been less fruitful, particularly, I know this is like a hot area, but social media in particular has been probably the least uh, uh, beneficial from a lead gen standpoint, just because it's like you're casting such a wide net
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think getting the kind of qualified leads that you might want is it's not a great channel for that in my experience. There's also other websites that are kind of how to describe it. It's like an agency directory type
Yeah.
website.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those I think are a little bit more successful, whether it's Clutch or others. You'll get a lot more direct leads or views or interest from people that are definitely further down the decision uh, tree in terms of wanting a project. So those have been good, but bar none, the one that's been most successful is word of mouth and affiliates and partnerships. Those have always been the best.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, and look, that's actually been a big piece of our business, how we've grown, and we're a marketing agency, right? Because there's really nothing as valuable as somebody you've worked with telling somebody else that's like them, right? Especially
Yep,
if it was a good client relationship. They're like, hey, one helped me a lot. I think he could help you. And so then you're having
exactly.
the conversation with that pre-built trust that's been established
Exactly.
already by somebody else, right? And there's results, right? There's outcomes they can show. And we say this all the time, like the number one job or the biggest success that we can have from a marketing standpoint is just to accelerate that word of mouth and make it easier for people
Yes.
to talk about you that have already worked with you or to refer you. That's why it's one of the reasons why we're so bullish on email marketing and newsletters,
Mm,
right? Because it's just that constant, consistent reminder of like, hey, we're here. This is what we do. This is how we help. Here's some examples of kind of like this is some proof of our skill and our knowledge, but also this is some information that may be helpful to you. And so that tends to put that little bit of a bug in the ear of past clients, past prospects, your network, people that could refer business to you to be able to do that. So I think that is right on. And also on the social media point, it doesn't surprise me that you say that. I think especially given what you do, it's probably really difficult to be able to tell that story and to showcase that in like
yeah.
bite-sized snippets outside of like conversations like this, right? Where you're able to talk about it. But like, yeah, you could probably put your portfolio out. You could put some cool stuff out on like Instagram, but it's really difficult to truly see the value of what you do in such a small kind of space.
Yeah,
Um,
and honestly, a lot of the work that my company does is almost always under NDA. So it's like you'll be working with a client
yeah,
for maybe like a year, and so then there's nothing to show. There's nothing to, post on Instagram. There's
right,
nothing you
right.
can show. And in fact, I think a lot of the types of entrepreneurs that where we work with are probably going to be looking for design consultants or other services through a network of some sort, whether it's through VCs, through a network from their incubators, where they're like, okay, I'm looking to scale up. Do you have any referrals for companies that can help us with XYZ? We're at this seed stage and we're looking to get branding or something like that. Like, it's much easier to get referrals that way than it is to just be like, oh, some I don't know, some entrepreneur with an app idea found our designs through Instagram one day and decided to reach out. That almost like that doesn't happen. That never happens.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean it's the most valuable thing, and it goes, this is one of those principles we were talking about, right? Like, given everything you said, the most valuable thing is having that network of past clients, of people that can refer you, of people that trust you, because that is going to put you in, what's the phrase? Like, it's going to increase the surface area for serendipity, right? Of just like,
Yep.
people being in a conversation, or you coming up, or your work kind of being in a place where it can be shared, right? You know, to colleagues or former colleagues. In fact, we've had a lot of clients who there was somebody on their team that actually left and went and joined another team. And
Yeah.
even though they couldn't talk about the work that we did, maybe because we've done some stuff that's under NDA as well, you know, they go to someplace else and they say, hey, look, we worked with, you know, Rogue Pine and they were great. And that brings us in, you know, so those are some of those things that are really valuable. And just having a track record is the only way to really establish that, and being good with people, and being a good networker. Well, this has been really, really interesting. It's been super insightful. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Before we go, I want to make sure that people can get in touch with you and they can follow you. What's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go to our company's website, WJYstudios.com, all one word, and be more than happy to help them.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to link that. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, check the description. All the links to One's content and his website will be in there. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, check the show notes. Guys, I want to thank everybody for joining us today on the Grow Rogue podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and share this with a colleague that you feel like would get some value from this. It means the world to us, and we appreciate you for joining us. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one.